Before we talk about the transformation of American manufacturing, we first need to talk about some developments in the American economy that made those transformations possible, particularly changes that expanded the size, the perceived size of the American marketplace. There was significant investment in the first part of the 19th century in internal improvements and other kinds of infrastructures that expanded the perceived size of the American marketplace. Canals, steamboats, roads and turnpikes, railroads. So to give you an example of the kind of transformation I'm talking about, here we have a map on the left indicating about how long it took for people or goods to travel from New York in a day, 2 days, 3 days, and so forth. And this map describes a world where the speed of transportation and the expense of transporting goods is still based largely on where nature has provided water. In fact, in the colonial period, many coastal North American cities were in many ways more closely connected in terms of goods and information and culture with the mother country across the Atlantic than they were with the inland of North America. That begins to change with the construction, particularly of canals and other changes in American transportation in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. The most important of which is the Erie Canal, which connects the Hudson River Valley with the Great Lakes in the 1820s. And then in the 1830s and 40s, another series of canals were built connecting the Great Lakes with the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys. This turns the entire northeastern part of the country into a much larger and much more fluid marketplace where goods and people can move more freely. On the right, you can see how much that has already transformed transportation by 1830. And by the middle of the 19th century, you can see a significant transformation where virtually the entire Northeast and Midwest is part of a much larger, much more integrated marketplace. As we'll see when we talk about changes in manufacturing, the perception of a larger market, the idea that you can transport more goods over longer distances more inexpensively, causes manufacturers and other people in the economy to think of the marketplace as larger, and this has an impact on what kind of economic decisions that they make. So in addition to canals, you also have the development in the United States of overland roads and turnpikes, steamboats, which allow people and goods to move upriver almost as quickly as they can move downriver, which was another significant transformation in the efficiency of American transportation. And by the middle of the 19th century, the importance of railroads begin to have an impact as well. As we'll see in the next mini-lecture, when you begin to have entrepreneurs and business people and manufacturers trying to figure out how to make more goods tomorrow than they made yesterday, it begins to have an impact on a wide variety of things in the American economy. And you don't really see American manufacturers thinking that way until you see this kind of investment in internal improvements, roads, steamboats, and so forth. There are also a few what you might call legal infrastructures in the first half of the 19th century that also have an impact on entrepreneurial decision-making in the United States. I would highlight two, the first being the emergence of something called general incorporation laws, where it became easier to form corporations to conduct certain kinds of businesses. A general incorporation law means that anyone who meets a set of requirements can form a corporation. A corporation is a legal form that makes it possible to separate your personal economic liability from your business liability. If your business fails, they don't come take your personal property. Before general incorporation laws, it was frequently the case in the United States that to form a corporation, you would have to have the state legislature pass a bill forming the corporation. But several states in the first half of the 19th century began passing general incorporation laws, which made it easier to form these kinds of corporate entities. In addition, the Supreme Court in the first half of the 19th century established a body of federal law that tended, first of all, to federalize the regulation of American business and to regulate American business in ways that tended to encourage entrepreneurial risk-taking. Mostly a series of Supreme Court decisions that strengthened contract law and that made it more difficult for local politicians to meddle in private business if those private businesses became politically unpopular. As a result, in the first half of the 19th century, taken as a whole, you have both literal physical and also legal infrastructures which expand markets, encourage capital accumulation, and encourage the kind of entrepreneurial decision making that we'll see the impact of in the next lecture.